You're listening to Technomics, connecting you to insights on digital transformation and the marketplace, with your hosts Robin Ituli and Jeremy Nilsson. The hosts' opinions are their own. Enjoy the show.
Jeremy, how do you know if you can trust someone?
That question alone really kind of makes me concerned about our relationship, Robin.
Do you feel nervous being around me right now? You're questioning my trustworthiness.
That's very leading in a scary way.
So, you know you can trust me.
Absolutely.
But we don't know about trusting a whole lot of other things in this world, like the terms and conditions in any variety of applications for the agreement that I am truly not reading all the way through.
As someone who deals with contracts on a daily basis, I can agree to that. Those terms and conditions are daunting.
I mean, can I just pause right here to say thank heaven for great procurement people and excellent contract writers?
That's right. My life would be extremely miserable without that support team behind me.
So the other faction of people who get really concerned about this, I think, are our own IT administrators, because we're agreeing to a wide variety of things that are coming onto devices and therefore onto the network without their express consent. And we had a really good conversation with Matt Skaff and Carlos Sotero.
Matt and Carlos, those guys are great.
They're their own show waiting to happen. They'll have a spinoff here, inside of a month.
They're the Mork and Mindy of our happy days.
They're the Mork. Oh, that's a Snapchat filter waiting to happen. They are
patent pending.
They are a dynamic duo, that is for sure. And they helped talk me through a somewhat existential crisis about whether or not I was becoming a danger to the enterprise by downloading Elmo calls.
Oh, Elmo calls. You're going to have to fill me in.
I'm going to have to fill you in on Elmo calls. It's when Elmo actually calls you.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So that's right up there with that initial question of how can you trust someone? Nothing like getting an unsolicited call from Elmo. My
score just dropped, didn't it?
Listen,
when you have a nearly 2-year-old who cannot be calmed by anything else, Elmo calls you. Okay, we did spend a lot of time discussing Elmo calls, though, because it's one of those many apps that you get on your phone. Like, for an example, a certain keyboard, any of the Kardashian emojis. What are you agreeing to with the Kardashians when you download that? Are they able to read the entirety of your text messages or emails where you are using Kim or Courtney or Chloe's emojified personas?
I wonder what the analytics are on the back end of that keyboard agreement.
There are some, but if you read into it, it actually allows them to read what you are passing through, not just anything that comes across on that keyboard. There's a correlation to it.
Well, and the funny thing about that is if you go back to some of the more recent announcements from Apple, right? When you look at the way that they're doing text messaging and they're very focused on emojis, right? They recognize that the up and coming generations are less and less dependent on written language and can communicate effectively through emojis. To your point, if you're collecting analytical data on the usage of messages and how that's being constructed through an emoji pack, I mean, you're basically capturing an entire conversation.
It's the modern hieroglyphics. And who, I wonder, will be the keeper of the millennial Rosetta Stone?
It's all in there. It's intuitive. It's very strange.
There are more corporate things that will definitely get discussed with Matt and Carlos, like their philosophy on how you should date your MDM provider, not marry them, along with other really wise nuggets from these two, and a whole lot of fun in this conversation.
Well, Matt's right up there. He's a fellow gamer like me, so we share a lot in common. I'm excited.
There was some discussion about Xbox names.
I'm not surprised.
So when we come back, Matt and Carlos will take us to an even more entertaining place than we've already gotten to. And there'll be some help in there too.
I'm looking forward to it. Your Dynamics CRM system is vital to your sales process, and more importantly, your business growth. However, think of how important customer insights are to your marketing teams, customer service teams, public relations, social media interactions, and the list goes on. Let Blue Metal take your Dynamics CRM to the next level with full lifecycle customer relationship management, enabling you to attract and retain customers, define and improve sales processes, offer consistent interaction across all sales and services channels, a full 360-degree view of your customer with ubiquitous access, including mobile platforms. And Blue Metal's connected field services allows for proactive service delivery and real-time insights as to how and when your customers are using your products, resulting in improved service level performance and with the ability to leverage Internet of Things-based telemetry, metrics, and predictive analytics to have a real-time view of how and when your customers are using your product and proactively schedule service, raising quality and reducing costs to you and your customer. To learn more, visit insight.com/bluemetalcrm. That's insight.com/bluemetalcrm.
All right, so let's bring Carlos Sotero and Matt Skaff, both IT directors of infrastructure at Insight, into this conversation. We'll let them duke it out about which half of the infrastructure that they are directing is the better one. So Matt and Carlos, welcome to Technomics. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, so today we're talking about security and user expectations when it comes to workforce enablement. All right, so today we're talking about security and user expectations when it comes to workforce enablement. Tentatively, we have discussed this episode as being, well, hey, who's that on my network? More and more, there are devices and applications and things like their Fitbit, like mine, that just buzzed.
That's awesome. Are you getting steps in?
No, not presently. I am firmly seated in front of my microphone.
Awesome. But you brought your own Fitbit. That's cool.
I did. It's not connected to our network, just my phone.
Thankfully.
Which is protected by AirWatch.
That is correct.
Yes.
And that is part of my awesome responsibilities as AirWatch.
Oh, awesome.
AirWatch is always watching you.
I appreciate getting to engage with the new applications and people who can help me navigate them.
Yeah. One of the challenges you just hit on is that essentially, how do you manage all the devices coming in, right? Bring your own device is one of the challenges. How do you do it with data privacy understandings, segregation of information from a personal standpoint, and then also corporate data as well? It's really not about purely security. It's really about the data on the device. And what you see is most people today have a smartphone, right? So you see corporate-owned devices less and less in the environment, similar to what you'd see for transportation. There was back in the day where everybody had a company car. But now as you're a digital worker, you're actually responsible for getting yourself to the digital highway, which the internet, right? So is it the company's responsibility to provide that for you or your own? But how do you do that and make sure it's done with data privacy? It's a mobile device management platform. Our choice was AirWatch. There are many choices out there in the market. Our philosophy is you date your MDM provider, you don't marry them. So we'll evaluate that on next year to determine if we have to take a different direction. It provides the segregation of information that's necessary, and it's a decent platform. And there are other capabilities we could use it for, but we're not quite there as far as putting all the applications out there that a teammate would use. That's one of the things we're looking at, is making it easier for them to consume those applications in one stop.
We should establish in this conversation that I am definitely the user who anything outside of routine sort of stumps, hence my earlier commentary. But, I think in general, like the whole BYO movement can be sort of a sore muscle because everybody has to work so hard to make it happen, right? On the IT side, you guys are putting so many things into place to, protect us from ourselves as employees. And then, on our side, trying to figure out how to best utilize what's been provided. That's a conversation we had earlier around applications. How do you put the right library of apps into play so that you are increasing productivity and collaboration while you're still protecting the data and making sure that there is that division of personal and professional.
Yeah, and before you even go into that, you brought up an interesting comment, right? You said sore muscle. And I think, some of it can be more of a headache sometimes on certain things, right? Kind of a, 1 box to 5 boxes of Tylenol kind of rating factor off of that, right? So it just depends on how you want to rate some of those things.
Excedrin IT migraine.
Excedrin IT migraine, right? Because, it's come along and you've got a different perspective. And to me, you've got different generations that view different things in a different way, right? You might have more tenured folks that are more legacy and are going to have a harder time accepting a BYO, or you have a different generation with less tenure coming out of school that are used to or more expecting of a BYO program, right? You brought out certain challenges or applications and different types of things, and what we're seeing, or what I'm seeing, my view is you're seeing a balance, right? You're kind of seeing a hybrid where you're slowly going that direction. It's not just going to be a clean cut, but it's definitely evolving that way over time. And that's going to cause issues because people, like you were saying, right, concerned about data, concerned about, if this is mine, is the company going to reimburse me for some of this, or should the company reimburse me for some of this? If it's mine, can you tell them what to do with it? Do you deal with it through technology, or do you deal with it through paper-based policy, right? So your security organization is going to have a point of view, your developers, your end users, the user of the technology is going to have a different view. And it's going to be an interesting balance to find the in-between to make sure everyone's happy, right?
What an interesting thought. I hadn't considered, that you have like the developer, like get it done, make it live, make it work perspective versus how do we handle this from a paper-based policy perspective? How do those two engage in your world?
So if you think about it, we've seen companies where, to me, you have kind of let's say your again, tenured companies and your new startups. Your new startups seem to be, from what I've seen, veering more towards kind of a paper-based policy, right? Where you'll bring your own laptop, you'll bring your own device, but you're going to guarantee to me that you're going to stay up on your patches, you're going to be staying up on your antivirus, you're going to make sure that you're taking the right steps, and I'm trusting you to protect the company with that data, with everything else. Where legacy, the older companies are like, if you're going to bring that device in, I'm going to make sure that I have technical checks that your antivirus is updated. I'm going to push you that antivirus. I'm going to push you those patches versus trusting you that you've got it taken care of on your own. And I think, there's where some of the challenges come in. But
No, I think that's essentially where we were with the deployment of a mobile device platform, right? We had to replace the incumbent because we received complaints that it wasn't working for certain teammates, right? They wanted the native iOS application email to work, and it didn't work in the previous solution. Then it was used from a paper policy perspective to actually have a stipend. And in order to have that stipend, you actually had to use the MDM platform. But then you've seen recently where that stipend's really been removed, and it's still required to use that MDM platform to protect the data for both the teammate and the corporation. And I think that's balancing act you see evolve over time. The part, in order to get to your other question, is how do you get to those applications that make people more productive? You first have to get past the trust issue. When we first rolled out the MDM solution, everybody had a lot of trust issues, and essentially that we were watching them, seeing what they were up to, who they were calling, who they were texting.
You're just seeing photos of my kids. I'm not worried about it. Well, I have to say, I remember when we did make that transition in our own organization, and I had some questions myself. When you read the actual policy, it's kind of, it's very black and white. It's a policy, it's meant to be. But I was like, wowza, that's really
Well, here's the funny thing, though, is what I've seen, and I don't know if Carlos or you guys have even noticed it or agree with it, but yes, people scrutinize the policy. Something comes out from your own company that you work for that pays you, and you're reading every word, and you don't want to click OK.
Ask me if I've read the whole Apple agreement. Is that where
you
you're
go to
going?
the Apple agreement, or you go to the App Store and download whatever gizmo, latest app. Oh, I'm going to shopit.com or Pokemon Go. You don't even read it. You're hitting OK because I want to go catch Pokemon, or I want to do this. But your company says, hey, we want to try to provide you email, and you're scrutinizing it like they're going to take over something off your phone or off your device.
Well,
But-
what I have to give real credit to your entire team and to our CIO, Mike Gugamos, is the communication that was very transparent about this. You know, there's maybe a stereotype, Nick Burns, the company computer guy, that maybe not the most effective communicators. I'm just saying not true here, because the way that was communicated on a one-to-one basis when people did come with questions or scenarios or, you know, PG-13 commentary about what may or may not have been available from their phone that probably told you more than you wanted to know. You know, I think it was really addressed really well, and that may be part of the other reason why the adoption did go over so well ultimately. I mean, my recollection is there was probably about week to 10 days of conversation where people were really trying to understand it. And
I think a week to 10 days being generous. I think it was a week to 10 months, maybe.
hey,
Some of the
perception is
conversations.
reality.
Okay,
Here's
all
my
right.
perception right now.
I like your
we'll go with
perception
yours.
better than the
come
reality.
be in my reality.
It's a good world to live in.
I don't know.
I want to visit.
Fair warning, my reality also involves toddlers playing with my phone. And the one thing that I'm constantly concerned about is my little guy who's 20 months old, like hitting the code too many times and then like everything like disappearing and never being recovered again because he's trying to get to Elmo calls. So it's really important that we have Elmo calls. Otherwise, we can't navigate through certain situations.
Okay. I don't think that's a current feature of most MDM platforms, but we will investigate that for you.
If you can create an
curious,
enterprise version of this,
I'm
I
thinking of
would
an
be
Elmo
delighted.
Calls application here at Insight, actually. I'm like, oh, we could roll that out.
I love the ideas that this kind of stuff can spark. So we talked a lot about mobile smartphones, really, but there's a lot of other things coming into the environment right now, and I'm curious to hear what is interesting to you and what's a challenge for you in terms of things.
One of the trends that's interesting is bring your own access, right? So if you are a digital worker, should you receive payment for your internet connection or your cell phone plan? I think that's an interesting trend. You're seeing more and more companies just expecting, just like, you know, your ability to get to the office from a car perspective, transportation, basically expecting the worker to actually have that access and not receive compensation for it. I think there's some use cases where you have 24/7 type of responsibilities where it's probably valid to actually have that paid for by the corporation. But that's an interesting trend. Also, bring your own application. I think bring your own application is interesting in that, do you bring your own email solution? I would be hesitant to go that direction. If you look at, you know, political issues aside, the segregation of email from even the Hillary Clinton, you know, issues from a Secretary of State standpoint, you're better off having that segregation of data specifically. I think that's important for both the, you know, company and the entity, in addition to the individual as well.
And a number of agencies and people who have dealt with that very same scenario. It seems like a lesson people just don't learn. And, you know, a lot of organizations, I think, also deal with kind of that trust thing as they think about moving to the cloud and how do they segregate when, you know, all of that email data, as an example, moves out there. How does that affect?
If it's in the cloud, it's in a data center, right? I think a lot of the people that are looking at it from a security standpoint alone, security is a moving target. You're never going to be secure enough, right? There's always going to be a new vulnerability, a new way of attacking. So I don't know if you're necessarily going to look at it from a security standpoint. It's really about the data, the ownership of the data, being able to segregate the data. You have to start looking at some of the recent vulnerabilities in the healthcare space. That's a red flag, having all that, you know, payment information and personal information in the same database. That's a big mistake. You need to segregate the data. Logically, don't make it so hard that you can't get to it, right? You obviously want to take care of that part of it as well.
What I think an interesting trend is the expectations of things, right? So now with end users, it's, you know, they should be able to get to anything and everything should work anywhere, anytime, on any device.
That's not unreasonable.
Of course not. There's no differences like that. Microsoft and Apple play perfectly together. Microsoft
As long
and
as
Cisco
I can
play
get to
perfectly
Elmo
together.
calls, everything's fine.
But it is interesting because what you're competing with is any point in time you pick that up, whether you're sitting in Starbucks, whether you're sitting in an office, whether you're driving down the expressway. Everything is supposed to work and work flawlessly.
But not the latter, because nobody's doing that, or they shouldn't be.
Yeah, you tell that to people when you're hearing audio problems and wind whistling through with windows down or the air conditioning fan blowing.
Well, there is something that the expectations piece is one that's really interesting to me, because I think that that's a really tangible way that we can talk about IT being, a revenue generator, right? Like when your workforce is doing the work and they can engage their customer, or they can access the files to help move a project along, those are really, really tangible ways in which we're able to say your information technology, your intelligent technology infrastructure and services and design is having an impact at the bottom line. How do you articulate it when you guys are talking about?
I think you hit on it. It's ease of use, right? So how do you manage the expectations from a security standpoint, make sure you're adhering to the paper policy, but then also providing ease of use? For example, two-factor authentication is great, but it's also kind of clunky, right? Having to pull out your token and put that information in there. So we're working on things like direct access, where it still meets the security requirements, but you're able to fire up your laptop and you're directly connected to the applications and have them at your fingertips. So, those are some of the things we're looking at, is now that we've gotten past some of the challenges we had with stability in the environment, which you really need in order to have credibility with the business functions, we're starting to look at those ease of use things. For example, the recent thing we did with like distribution groups, having self-service or distribution groups for email, just trying to make things easier.
That worked too, by the way. I'm going to give you the kudos for that. Thank you.
That one is me. It's Carlos.
Carlos for the win.
Yes. And the ease of use is always interesting, right? It always makes me think back to, like, again, with the expectations and the ease of use. I think back to like one of the Matrix movies where the dude takes Neo down to the bottom of Zion and he goes, hey, these machines, they're functioning all day. They keep me alive. I have no idea how they work, but I'm alive and this stuff works. I mean, that's kind of interesting now, because as you pick something up, it's got to be easy. It's just got to work.
Well, it does just have to work. And how often does the challenge in that become the old picnic principle? Problem in chair, not in computer, where, you've got it essentially not just is it stable, but is it foolproof? And I'm your use case for that, right? Like, I said it way up front. I have never, ever claimed on any of these podcasts to be any kind of IT genius or be able to do anything more than what seems logical to me, which, like I'm being highly influenced by Elmo at this point in my life. So, take that all with a grain of salt there. But in all seriousness, though, like, how are we permitting the BYO trend to happen before we have solutions to address the concern? So we're defining stability, we're creating ease of use, all the while you've got all these other things coming at you. The expectation from the workplace consumer is changing. How do you keep pace with all three areas?
I don't think really you can. I think you have to prioritize the most important things to the business and then attack them one at a time. You're not going to be able to do everything all at once, right? You're not going to be bleeding edge and cutting edge on everything. And nor do you want to, because the more bleeding edge and cutting edge you get, the more issues, you're the finder of the problems that then companies can go back and resolve. So it's a balance, right? What's important to the business, what's going to give the most bang for the buck for the teammates to get the benefit out of, and then, to increase, increase their productivity. And then you focus on those and you just keep knocking them out one at a time based on priority.
Is that how you tackle them?
No.
What's your approach?
I just deal with every unreasonable demand with a smile.
You're kind of a yes and kind of guy. That's one of my favorite sayings from Tina Fey. And if Jeremy were with us during this conversation, he would jump in with 30 Rock quotes right now. But she always says, say yes and figure the rest out later.
And you hit on it. Our approach is really how do you get to the yes, right? Or yes, maybe. You don't want to say a definitive no, right? And that's where you have to look at the possibilities and go from there. There's always a technical solution if you have unlimited budget unlimited resources. However, that is not the reality of most enterprise IT organizations or even SMB or mom and pop shops. You don't have unlimited resources in any aspect. So you have to prioritize, to Matt's point, and then figure out from that list of prioritizations and risks, because if you're looking at it from a corporate responsibility standpoint, there's a manageable layer, acceptable layer of level of risk.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll come right back. You know, when you're like Jeremy and I, and you work in technology, oftentimes you see a news headline and you just start thinking, I wonder how many data centers are required to power that initiative.
All the time. It's so funny. You see traditional headlines come through and my brain goes into what's underneath that from an IT perspective.
Well, because let's be honest, we live in a day and age where you don't have a lot of opportunity to really dive deep into some of the areas and some of the headlines that come across that are really, really important. And from a technology perspective, where technology is fueling so many of the things behind the breaking news, somebody's got to start telling those stories.
Absolutely. As intriguing and important as the headlines are, for us in the technology space, the solutions that power those decisions is just as important.
So that's what we did. We produced a digital magazine called Technically because we found that technically there's so much more to discuss when you're talking about things that really matter and impact our daily lives. So if you want to take a deeper dive on the headlines from a technology perspective, really encourage you to subscribe to Technically. We push an issue once a quarter, and it's always going to be relevant and well-researched. You too can subscribe today at technicallymagazine.com. So, as you look at where we are right now in the next, I don't know, if you look ahead 1 to 2 years, what would be something that you really want to enable for the teammates that you think is very possible?
It's a good question. There's, a couple different answers off of that, right? Easier access to the applications and tools that they need to do their job, right? I think it goes back to really working towards that anywhere, anytime, any kind of device which incorporates whatever hardware they want to choose to use, right? Getting close to that, it works and it's easy, right? I know I can open up, I can push a button, and it's solid. That's working towards that, I think.
Similar look and feel to every application and service you use from an IT perspective, ideally, because that is a challenge, right? If you're doing order entry or you're doing exchange and email, or if you're even using Skaff for business, having that same look and feel, I think is ideal. But the challenge is if you have a bunch of third-party applications, how do you achieve that? 2 to 3 year time horizon for that, I think, is probably unrealistic. But I think it's a goal that most people should start going for, or even the same partner, right? All the Microsoft user interfaces being the same, even though they've been put together from acquisitions. Those are one of the things that we deal with from a challenge perspective. But the expectation is for everybody to have the same user experience, and that could be somebody ordering something through SAP. Is that easy today? Should it be easier? Yes, it should be.
Right.
I love that point. And we bring this up in almost every single episode that we've done in Technomics so far. And that is how deeply brand is integrated into all of those solutions. So, listeners will know that my team has the great privilege of being able to really shepherd the brand. So hearing that there's a focus on the technical side about how to accomplish that, even with third-party vendors, is something that's really important, because we end up having those conversations and more people are saying, oh, hey, we should loop creative in, we should loop design in and see what they can do here, to find out that, the parameters we can work in are, pretty limited at this point. But for me, if I put my IT hat on for a moment, I think that it helps adoption if we're able to brand it in the enterprise version and say, we vetted this, We know this. It looks like us. It acts the way that we act as an organization. And I think that can help propel some of those objectives over time.
Correct. And one of the things we can accomplish in the next 2 to 3 years is moving away from email as the main communication mechanism.
Please do that.
It's a passive form of communication, right? It is not an active form. It's not a conversation like we're having today.
Passive in so many ways.
So what we're investigating today is leveraging third-party applications to create more of an active communication mechanism, like a cockpit for how you come into the morning, and depending on your type of work, you would have all the applications you have in that cockpit to make, communicate on projects, whether that's metrics you need to do your job and determine how you're performing or your team's performing. That's one of the things we actually have an active project to determine, how we approach that internally for the different types of work, the digital worker experience, modern workplaces, how Microsoft refers to it today. And that's definitely within the 2 to 3 year time horizon.
Yeah, and to see it, get good enough to where as we're visiting and showing up to offices that we were fighting off the HR-approved hugs from teammates. Because to me, I'd love to see the hug factor increase in our communication too. I'm a hugger. It's just me.
I can totally appreciate that.
Hug your IT professional.
Hug your IT professional.
That's a day, right?
Yeah.
If it's not, we should totally make that a thing.
Hey, if you've got, bring your dog to work day, if you've got...
Bring your own device.
Administrative day.
This is going to be
Mother's
a
Day, Father's
phenomenal
Day.
Video when we make it.
Why not hug your IT professional day? I mean, think about it. Look at what happened to some of the airline industry over the last couple of days.
Delta needed a hug this week.
They needed hugs.
Southwest needed a hug a few weeks ago.
Right?
Yes.
All right. Matt and Carlos, I really enjoyed our conversation. This is fun.
I always enjoy our
good
conversations.
Good learning experience for me. I learned so much when I get to talk to you. I learned that Matt was actually a finance guy at one point.
I was. That is actually my undergrad. And
so was I.
Stop it. You were?
Yeah. Double major, MIS and finance.
All right. You might be a little bit smarter than me.
That's why we love our finance department so much. We're deeply rooted in what they grew up in.
I love our finance department too. They keep me on track. They also care deeply about brand. They want consistency, and I love them for that. All right, you guys, thank you so much. Learned a lot today about workforce enablement, some of the things you're thinking through as you build the infrastructure to help support our teammates be productive and happy and still have access to Elmo calls come what may.
Awesome. Hug on and prosper.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Miss you.
Love you.
Thanks for listening to Technomics. If you want to find more episodes, you can download the podcast from iTunes, Google, or your favorite podcast provider. And for more stories on intelligent technology, visit insight.com.